Hey everyone, I'm rather Incoherent, and today we're going to be talking about the Feast of Hemlock Vale, sort of as a critique of it, because previously in my session 0, I said that I wasn't really able to remember my first run of it. And I realized after setting up the scenarios and picking my first scenario, it wasn't true that I didn't remember Hemlock Vale. I had a really bad experience with Hemlock Vale, like everything was just a little bit frustrating, a little bit unfun. Just bad enough that I didn't really care about it, but everything I viewed as in some way unpleasant. As I replay Hemlock, I'm going to try my best to evaluate like what's good and what's bad and be fair to it. There are certain scenarios you won't be seeing on my channel when I play, just because you only see 6 of the 8. And additionally, there are prologues which you won't be seeing because they're story text in a trench coat. This looks like Arkham Horror, it looks like a map, but it's not. The skill tests are all low value, none of them are particularly difficult. The map is basic, there's just enough time to play for about 15 minutes, and your chance of failure is pretty low. As long as you don't waste your time going to Hemlock Chapel only to realize there is literally nothing to benefit you at Hemlock Chapel, you will reliably full clear this first section every time. You just tick everyone's box, you increase their reputation, you move on with your life, and you get a very extended mulligan phase. It's 15 minutes of story text in a trench coat. And while all of the preludes aren't as guaranteed as that first one, and I think the evening preludes are basically just story text, I don't think they have a map. The 3-day preludes are what I'm really upset about, what I find very annoying. These are just a waste of time. As I play this campaign off screen, I'm creating saves at the end of preludes, marking down everything that's happening in them, and I'll be trying to the best of my ability to just make a little word pad that tells me what to do to skip the prelude. Because I very genuinely do not want to play them. I'm worried that because it's so tied into story results, that I'm not going to be able to make a word pad to skip it, and I'll have to play them in the future. Because they're just a waste of time. They are actually just story text, but I'm not allowed to read the next page. I have to go make my moves. I think my criticism of preludes being a waste of time, story text in a trench coat, I think everyone largely agrees with that. However, when I was looking at the scenario to pick for my first scenario, I realized that I'd have to talk about 2 scenarios that I never actually played on the channel. And I realized that one of them would definitely be Written in Rock. So let's go talk about Written in Rock and why, whoops. So let's go talk about Written in Rock and why, in my opinion, this scenario is just terrible. So this first act here, or this first agenda, it's just a 5-doom agenda, and you can draw the top card of the encounter deck to move a resource from your location to scenario reference as a scrap, and if the card you drew is a power, get 5 resources. And then on the act, it tells you at the end of the round if each surviving investigator is at control station, advance, and hint, do it before the agenda advances. All of that makes perfect sense. You come through the scenario card, it's just a scenario card with scraps counter at the bottom. And then you have 4 random locations in a line, and you got control station, where you need to spend players' clues, 2 players' clues rather. And if you flip these and get a hypothetical 2-player result, you'll see that there are way more clues than you need. And it would be relatively normal. This happened in my team's 1 playthrough of this. Have like a dedicated cluer who just like goes through and grabs every clue. There's no reason to not grab them. You assume that if the clues are on the map, you'll need them later. In the exact same way that the scenario is asking you to assume that this scrap, good job game, you almost did it, is going to be useful. So we go through, the fighters and the flexes pick up the scraps, the cluer picks up the clues, and huzzah, you've got in your 5 scraps, you've got in your whole team to control station, it's time to advance. And before I do flip this over, I want to mention, do this thing, and since it's negative and hurts you, just assume that this is going to be worth doing later. That's very rare in official scenarios. I can't actually think of it off the top of my head, I'm sure there's another one. This is something that happens much more often in custom scenarios, where the game's just like, hey, you know, it's probably good. We're not gonna tell you why you should do this, we're just gonna put the option on the table, and you can assume, because we wouldn't do it if there was no reason, that stabbing yourself in the leg and drawing these encounter cards for an action is going to be worth it in the next part of the scenario. That is very unpolished. It's not something that I expect to see in official campaigns. In any custom campaign, I would see shit like this, and I'd be like, huh, that's weird. I feel like that should be more explained to the player. But it's fine. You assume that those are valuable, you assume the clues are valuable, that's just how Arkham works, and you flip. And you completely replace the map, but the important part's the second paragraph. Each investigator loses all but 2 of their clues. And you obviously needed to spend 2 players' clues, so in this example for 2 players, 4, but you have 12 left. So you get 10 and you throw away the rest of them. Or sorry, you get 2 and you throw away the other 10. You throw away the rest. You just lose 10 clues. You just steamrolled the first round of the scenario, and all you did was waste your resources. But here's the fucking crazy part, is that it's actually a punishment for just having a cluever. Because if you had been a flex team, 2 would go to this guy, and you'd only be wasting a smaller amount. And then you find out that this part of the map actually sticks around in the next part. If you'd left them there, you'd have access to them on the next turn, but instead you're on a dead location. So only 4 of the clues are wasted. And then if you look at the scenario, you can actually see exactly where they came from. All of the wasted clues beyond the player count clues, if you were a flex team, are from the 2 clue locations. So if you get the minimum amount of clues and you don't get clues from control station and you have a flex on your team and no dedicated fighters so that everyone has at least 2, then you spend down to 2 each and you're fine. But the way they're just asking me to trust that this works, you do the same thing for clues, and on many team compositions, you immediately get tremendously punished for no reason. And I want to be clear, when this advances, you go to the next agenda, but if you were at 3 Doom, you would stay at 3 Doom. There's no reason to strip out the clues. We're on the same Doom clock. It doesn't matter whether or not I got my clues in the first half or second half of the scenario. Either way, I'm getting clues on the same Doom clock. And if that's like a huge concern, then don't make a fucking random map. If you're worried I'm gonna randomly get so many clues in the first half that it becomes an issue, don't randomize the amount of clues I get. Put some sort of text somewhere that makes it make sense, so you don't just spend a turn getting these clues, throw them in the garbage, and then start here unable to move, stuck in your minecart, and just waiting to be able to play the game again because you had the audacity to play it on Act 1. This is wildly unpolished in a way that it like almost never is in official campaigns. And I wouldn't be salty about it. I really wouldn't if it weren't for what comes next, right? Where's the box? Oh no. I scuffed setup pretty badly by placing it on top of the other one, but we're getting there. And the fact that I know this from memory and don't need to reference clues or reference the book is not a good thing. No one should know this from memory. It's a lopsided Y, that's the empty spaces. You shuffle all the ones with 2, put them in the deck, shuffle, lopsided Y is left in the middle. When you make this puzzle, it is ridiculous. Here's a great example of it. It happens all the time. The map is so big that if you're playing on TTS, you're gonna have to move it up if you want to get rail tunnel. You can't move this around like you can other locations. It has a story card attached to it. You have to just move the map down to create this path and use that to get the prismatic shard. Thankfully, it's optional, because every time I've ever played this or thought about it, I've been like, yeah, you do that. You don't, this entire quadrant's a mistake. Don't go there, right? This puzzle feels comically unpolished to me. The fact it's so normal to see a prismatic shard and an entire fourth of the map really that's next to the prismatic shard, where it's like even considering going there is adding like 5 rounds to the game. The prismatic shard isn't worth very much. There's only 2 victory in all of this. So on average, you lose like 1 victory from not going down here. It's so hard to solve the puzzle for this. You frequently get solutions that are basically fucking impossible, because like the way you would get this with Simeon is like this sort of routes. Look at how many move actions that minecart has to take. What are we talking about? And Simeon's tremendously more important than the prismatic shard. He's worth more experience. He's worth more story resolution. The prismatic shard just isn't a tremendously valuable item. I don't even know it permanently goes in your deck or what it does in victory. I just remember being underwhelmed by it, because what it does specifically isn't important when you can't fucking get it with half the map generations. Additionally, another thing that I generally dislike about Hemlock Vale when I was looking at the first scenarios is that all of these are just big boss fights, right? If you go here at night, there actually is a boss here, but there's not right now. Instead, what there is just an absolute shitload of enemies, right? We're just gonna sort them out by their health values. So you have 22 cards, 3 of which have Surge. So there are 19 treacheries in the deck. There are 6 health of 2 health enemies. There's 12 health of 3 health enemies, 12 health of 4 health enemies, and these Chroma Blights summon, they're set aside somewhere, I don't even know where the box is, but it summons 2 6 health enemies, so another 12 health. So we have 12, 24, 36, 42 health of enemies in this deck, assuming you get the non-boss version of the scenario, right? Also, if you just stack all that up, the odds are about 2 to 3 that you get an enemy. Even though this is like the scenario that's not the boss fight, it's sure as shit not the scenario that's low on fighting. There's an outrageous amount of it. And then plenty of locations, I think this is the one, yeah, where you find more enemies. There are so many health points of enemies in this scenario. all of these two are like just defined by a huge boss. The Silent Heath is a scenario where there will be a huge boss spawning eventually, and if it spawns immediately, it's actually pretty tiny, and as the game goes on, you're eventually gonna have to fight the entire encounter deck a second time if it doesn't spawn soon enough, and it spawns towards the end, which is a nightmare in terms of game design, and again, feels like a polish issue, that the size of the boss is inversely proportional to the length the scenario has gone in a way that is entirely out of the player's hands. And Hemlock House is actually, like, I think one of the most like well-balanced, well-constructed encounter sets in this entire expansion. But also, it's a scenario where if you don't want to do that, you can just fight the house and it's another big boss fight, right? I don't know what the other scenario I'll have to do a video like this on is, but the fact that this is one of the two allegedly like not fight-centric scenarios, 2.5 if you want to count Silent Heath, and it has so much health of enemy in it. I feel like this entire campaign is defined by just like outrageous amounts of fighting, often with weird conditions that make fighting a hassle, discarding cards, and lack of polish. Those are the three things I think about when I think of Hemlock Vale. And I hope I'm being unduly mean to the scenario. I really do. But I'm not being unduly mean to Ridden and Rock. Like, I hope I'm being unduly mean to the rest of the campaign. But I gotta be honest, it feels to me like they thought, well, players only have to play 6 scenarios every campaign, so if like the stupid puzzle scenario ends up not getting completely refined, they'll just not play that. It doesn't really matter. That's very much how I feel about this. Having a story asset on a randomized location that can generate with connections facing off the map is ridiculous. I cannot imagine how that could ever be a part of a like refined, fully playtested version of this scenario. The part at the start where like you're just asked to assume scraps will matter, and they do, it turns into switches, but that's not very polished. You should know why it'll matter. And we do know why clues matter. Clues are how you progress the game. Clues are how you use abilities. And if we're assuming that matters, we assume clues matter, and you immediately get punished, but only if you generated a map with extra clues and had a dedicated clover. If you had minimum clues and flex clovers, there's no punish at all. It's completely fine to have all the clues, conditional on who has the clues and what all the clues actually means. I absolutely hate Ridden and Rock. I have nothing nice to say about this scenario. I think the fact that I tried to playtest Ridden and Rock and see like how it felt to play these characters, because I wasn't gonna play the scenario in the final version, it was be like a nice non-spoiler way of seeing how the characters did. I think that might be why all of my negative memories have come flooding back. I'm sure there's something in these scenarios that I like. I'm sure I'm being unduly mean to Hemlock Vale, and I'm looking forward to replaying it still, but like Jesus Christ, Ridden and Rock it's in D tier for adult on my campaign scenario tier list, right? There's no reason whatsoever why I should play Ridden and Rock. Just like Kuala Lumpur, you can go somewhere else, so don't come here. As we go into my actual playthrough of Hemlock Vale, I'm sorry if I'm like unduly dour in those scenarios. I'm hoping that I'll have a good time with them. I'm remembering them wrong. But I'm gonna be more critical and try to explain and articulate why I feel negative about the things I feel negative about as they happen. I think so much of the reason I'm getting all my negative memories back and none of the positive ones is that starting with Ridden and Rock is a lot like starting Scarlet Keys by going to Shanghai. Well, it's not actually Shanghai. You get sent around the world several times and you end up going to Kuala Lumpur, but same difference. Shades of Suffering is a god-awful scenario just like Ridden and Rock, although for very, very different reasons. And the optimal play for both of them is simply not to play them. Anyways, that's it for today. I've been rather Incoherent, and I'll be back tomorrow with my first episode of Hemlock Vale, where hopefully I will be much more positive. Thank you for watching, thank you to my supporters on Patreon, and I'll see you in the next one.